It's Wednesday, June 22nd, 2022, 6 p.m. This Board of Commissioners workshop is called to order. City Clerk, will you call the roll?
Mayor Hendricks,
Here.
Vice Mayor Andrews, Commissioner Kerr,
Here.
Commissioner Hudson,
Here.
First is public comment. We've actually got some of the public here tonight. If you have anything you'd like to comment on that is not on tonight's agenda, please step forward, state your name and address. You have 3 minutes to speak. Nope, okay. Okay, first on the agenda is First Amendment to Contract for Grasshopper Tree Service. Mr. Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Robin Gomez, City Manager, City of Madeira Beach. This is an extension of, we're looking for eventual approval from the Commission for our contract with Grasshopper Tree Service, for tree work, whether it be trimming, tree removal, or other type of needing to clean up trees, palm fronds, et cetera, throughout the city. We are, again, requesting to exercise the First Amendment in the agreement, which is enclosed in your packet. The rates are the same rates as we obtained back in 2019, or that were provided in the RFP that we issued. Back then, Grasshopper was the only company that actually responded. But they have been very receptive in providing the services that we've requested. I don't believe we've had any issues regarding them. So we're, to date, we've spent just under $11,000 out of a $20,000 budget. And additional rates are listed, or the rates are listed as to what they charge us per hour, and additional for any emergency response up to $120. The item also contains a copy of the agreement that includes the rates, but really no other changes other than we're simply looking to exercise the First Amendment to this agreement. I don't think anything else to add, Megan?
I've read it. It's fine with me. I think we'd do good to go ahead and extend the contract at today's rates with what we're running into with inflation. So I'm all good. Have you guys got anything?
Nope, if you're happy with the service, then
Yeah, they've been, as I said, very responsive, including, I think I've shared with each one of you, I'm pretty, they like to see as few or as little palm fronds in our trees. So they've been very responsive to go out and assist until, we now have a bucket truck, but we're still utilizing their service when it's a multitude of tree areas like at Archibald to remove a lot of palm fronds, for example.
Now, will they just put this on their monthly schedule to once a month, or are they gonna do it upon request? Someone has to make a call, or how's that work? Since
It's a
on an
little bit
hourly
of
basis.
both, Megan.
Good evening. We do have a schedule. John's Pass is on a schedule, Bicentennial. But we do also request. They were here this morning trimming the palm trees in the parking lot. I asked them to do it yesterday, and they were here at 7 o'clock this morning. So they're very responsive.
Great.
A 3-man crew for $95 an hour with all the equipment, I think that's pretty good.
That's a deal.
And we have almost 2,000 plus palm trees in the city. So
Really?
yes.
Yeah, we do have a lot of trees. I would also want to point out, they do have a certified arborist.
Correct, the owner.
Within the company, the owner. So if we hire the need for, again, just to review whether the tree needs to be removed or not, it's good to have that level of expertise.
Okay. Any other discussion? Is there any public comment on this? Nope. Next is Second Amendment to the cleaning contract with W&A Cleaning. Again, this one I've been over in detail. I'm fine with it. We've got some, I think we're adding the building department downstairs and possibly the county.
We are, yes, Mayor and Commission, we're looking to extend the agreement that was originally adopted back in 2014, or we've been using them, since 2014. What we are looking to increase is for the 7-month period, March to September, at the 4 main public locations, Archibald, Kitty Stewart Park, the Johns Pass Park on the west side of Gulf Boulevard, and in Johns Pass Village, those public restrooms that we own and maintain, they will clean those 3 times a day. So one additional time right now they're being cleaned twice a day. With the increased number of visitors and usage, they definitely need a 3rd time to be cleaned just about almost every day. So that's the reason for the increase from March to September. This item also includes a cost, should we add the county park on the 144th block of Gulf Boulevard I've discussed with the county the possibility of the city leasing that, as the city did some years ago, wherein we would be responsible for the maintenance, upkeep, and the parking enforcement, and then we would utilize our parking kiosks, and the parking rate would be at the current city's parking rate of $3 per hour. So this item includes what that cost would be to clean that facility, I believe, twice a day, Megan?
That would be on the same schedule as the beach bathrooms.
Same schedule. So twice a day from October to February and 3 times a day from March to September.
Yes.
And we have had, I will tell you in the time that I've been here, other than occasionally the bathrooms are closed a little bit early in the evening, haven't had any real concerns or complaints from this vendor, and we're very content with their services. Their response time is very, very quick when there's a need for them to come out. And they have dealt with quite a bit, I would say, additional at Johns Pass Park with some of the issues involving the vandalism to the restrooms, pulling out the
Picnic tables,
and other items on the picnic table, but in the bathrooms,
the
folks will
partitions, yeah.
partitions, issues occasionally with the toilets, pulling out the soap dispenser from the wall, so even with the mirror that's in some of the bathrooms. So they've had to deal with some of that as well, and I know in a few instances we had to have the deputies intervene out there while they were trying to finish cleaning our facilities.
Are we getting any more cameras down there by any chance?
We will be adding cameras, yes. We are almost finished, I think, with all the cameras that we originally added here at ROC Park, the fire station, this building, and the marina. And we are looking to add some at Archibald Park and at Johns Pass Park.
Okay. Okay. I know Wanda and Angel have done an exemplary job for us over the years, so I'm fine with that.
Sounds good.
I'm good, Joe.
Any public comment on this? Next is Rex Place curbing improvements. And I have no questions on that other than the sooner the better, because it's a mess when you walk along the sidewalks down there and even up here. So it's either that or get everybody in Parks and Recreation a broom to carry with them when they go around. Jay does not look happy about that.
Jay, is there anything you wanted to add regarding that? It's pretty, like I said, Mayor, it's pretty straightforward, simply
Yeah.
to just improve that curbing, and just logistically will look a lot easier to maintain and just more aesthetically
Well,
appealing.
yeah, it's all a part of fixing the place up, really. It's housekeeping, really. Have either of the commissioners got anything, any input on that, or?
Now, this, this total this total amount is how much? It's 65,000? Is that what it is? Is that what I remember?
I don't think it was that.
No, it's
Was this,
$23,298.
okay, yeah, there was just so many proposals. I was just working from memory. I guess my memory's not that good.
I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any public comment on this? Next is recreation facilities, fence repair and upgrades. I know some of the fencing around the ballparks and whatnot's been taking a beating over the years. And I think the ball field, the cages on the backsides. So what you got for us, Jay?
Yeah, so I can give you guys a quick, just a quick run through. If you want to go to the map, it's on page 104 of 110. That's on the agenda packet full of the website. It's the map that I placed. So I identified the 5 areas where we're looking to replace fencing. The first of which is the red, A. That's going to be, it connects the existing fence to the splash pad fence, and then it wraps from the splash pad to the rec center. That fence will close off entirety of the event field, or field 3, which we call it. That allows us, one, it's a safety thing for our after-school program. Right now, if they go outside of the building, it's considered a field trip. With that fence, it would be considered within the licensed property, so that we still have the same number of staff, same number of oversight, but it just a lot easier to make sure that they don't go running off, not that that's an issue. There will be a couple of gates located in that allow us to still utilize that, to still access the park, as well as if there are any events that are ticketed, for example, the concert this was past weekend, they don't have to put extra fencing up. So that'll help special events after school, everything.
But that'll be a removable fence, right?
It'll be a permanent white fence that
Oh, will it?
matches,
Okay.
yes, that matches the existing fence that's at the splash pad. The playground entrance, that's in disrepair right now, but we were looking to, that's the orange one on the south side of the property, looking to make that a gate similar to the dog park. To be 2 access gates, so a kid can't just go through one and be in the street. They'd have to make it through at least 2. And then families don't have to walk through around 2 other shell areas. So it would repair that and make it easier, and then we're also going to look into pavering that just so it's a smoother entrance. That's just a beautification and easier access.
Is that in a part of that budget?
Yes, sir, yeah. This is all, so it's all separately, A, B, and C were with one company, D is a separate company, and the E is a third company. So it's one whole number in the budget request, but there are 3 different quotes that are, C is a waterfall, that's just going to be a privacy fence, it's going to cover up that pool equipment back there. We're still working on that to get it running. We got some leaks to repair, but it'll cover that up and hide that for beautification purposes. D is an outfield fence that is more, it's going to be temporary, but it's more permanent. And this is where I joked about the revenue opportunities here. With the existing fence we have now, it's not sturdy enough for us to put banners or any advertising on it. This is going to be it'll be a metal frame that's 6 feet tall that will allow us to do banners, but it also allows us to remove it for special events, so it won't affect
Okay,
King of the Beach or anything else.
Yeah, that's the fence I was wondering if it was going to be removable.
Yes, sir, it will be. It's
Okay.
going to be, it'll be spring-loaded, it's going to be a lot prettier than what we have. It'll be 6 feet tall, which when we do shut these fields down before tournaments, will allow it to be more secure. So it's got a lot of purposes. They do have temporary bases on them that we haven't budgeted or looking to purchase yet, but in the future, we could upgrade those to be used for event fencing as well if we needed to. And then the last one is, it replaces the backstops on all 3 fences, would be netting instead of that chain link, and then puts padding along the bottom side, which on the spectator side, we would be able to sell sponsorships as well, because it's just there's gonna be these metal brackets that don't make or break people's experience, but it gives us an opportunity to try to cover those up with banners and put sponsorships back there as well. So we'll have 2 levels of sponsorships that we can do along the backstops there and then along that new fence. And, yes, sir.
No, I just don't want to break your train of thought here if you want to finish up.
So anyway, the big reason to bring this is all of these expenses, A, B, and C together are one quote, D is one quote, and then E is, so it's three separate quotes from three separate companies, all within the threshold, but we just wanted to make sure that you all were comfortable with us utilizing the ARPA funds for that as an improvement for the park.
Yeah, if we need to do with it and it's got the blessing of the city manager, I'm good with it.
And if we do it now, it comes out of, it is in our capital improvement already. If we do it now, it comes out of that, and then we're allowed, we can start getting onto sponsorships and selling all the ad space that we have available.
Okay. What I was going to ask, we had discussed upgrading the vending area, the
Concession stand?
concession stand. Was anything put in? I didn't notice it in the budget.
It's in the,
Yeah,
it's in our
Is it in
capital
there?
list.
Yeah, it's the
Okay,
capital.
good enough. Okay,
Alrighty.
it's good with me.
Okay, it's good with me, but in addition, on the westmost field, you see how the gray goes along the sidewalk and kind of out into, go to the left of where you're, right there, how the clay runs down that sidewalk.
here. And
When you
here,
were
right,
talking, yeah, when you were talking earlier about
curbing.
or blocking the flow of water, is there something we can do there? I've had a lot of people, or some people complain about that.
Oh, I actually missed that in the map, the previous one. That was included in that quote for curbing.
Okay,
It's, he quoted that full stretch plus that. We have some curbing there now, if you look at it, we can drive our equipment on there in the small gap. This would close off that entire batting cage. So that would have all of the, because, we put that wooden border in there that years ago. So this would upgrade that as well.
Yeah, there's
Not
some,
not this, but the previous topic, yes.
Jay said there is some curbing there, but it's not, I don't think it's high enough, and then.
There's a small gap because we're in between
That's
the
right.
two projects. That gap will be closed and then it'll run all the way. And the water's running underneath now too. And once they put that curbing in, that'll go away. So
Yeah, everything's orange down there. I'm wondering, would some type of artificial turf there be another option?
where's
Would
that?
we?
On that section?
Yeah. As opposed to having to curb it, or do you think curbing's the better route to go?
Well, it's probably less expensive than putting in the synthetic turf, because it would, realistically, it would have to be the whole pitching and batting area,
Right.
right, Jay, or?
Yeah, it would have to be each of those. I mean, then there's.
Yeah, it may
Yeah, there's a-
be ridiculously.
Yeah, there's a
expensive.
pitching, so a warm-up area for the pitchers,
Right,
and then kind of toward the field in this area where the pointer is, and then the rest of it is the batting cage. Now, again, they can all be synthetic turf, but I think it's going to be a lot more expensive than curbing.
okay, forget what I said then.
And
Just
we
ask.
do have, I know there's a small puddle spot there too. We do have pavers that were on order. They're
To
2
replace.
weeks out for that, and it's gonna replace a good chunk of those pavers just to get that, because it's pretty much the low spot on the property right there. So we're trying to combat that, but working through it.
And I will tell you just kind of anecdotally, in chatting, when we had the college teams playing here, and then when I was in February at a tournament in Clearwater also with other college teams, it seemed like the dirt is preferred over the synthetic.
Yeah, could
when
be.
you're warming up, and also the batting, because that's the surface. Most of the teams around the country play on a dirt surface. There's only a few in the northern part, or Iowa, that play in an indoor venue. There aren't very many. Most college softball teams come to Florida right, during February and March to start their seasons. So that, I mean, that's just my observations and speaking with quite a few of the players on the teams.
Okay, I'm good with it.
Makes sense.
Okay,
Alrighty, thank you.
thank you. Any comments? Any public comment on this? Got a big chance tonight. Okay, next is city master plan. We actually have a master plan that many years ago, they spent like $300,000 on, where the whole city was going to be basically a Tuscan design, as I remember, but it was never followed. And it's sort of like ordinances. If we're not going to follow them, there's no sense in having them. The floor is open for discussion.
Well, Director Portal is the expert here, so.
Well, this isn't my item, actually. I think Commissioner Kerr wanted us to discuss it.
Yeah, I mean, I
Right.
can bring up,
And you're correct, they had spent, I think, $250, about $1,000 on a plan in 2002 with the Duane Plater-Zabert Group and with Jones Edmonds and Associates. And there was a lot of community involvement. It didn't necessarily have to include a Tuscan design, but they tend towards a certain thing, especially the Duane group that does most of those kind of artsy drawings because they base it on what they're used to in Miami. So you have to be kind of careful when you get one of those plans that they're not just picking up pieces from another plan they've done and dropping them into yours. There was a lot of community involvement. It's a charrette process where they get the community involved. And there are some really important, useful things in the plan, although the community did not adopt it and did not implement it, especially in the downtown area. They came back over the course of the next few years with a couple of different iterations of an entirely different approach for a special area plan to the downtown. So if you look at the pictures here, they do not in any way relate to what was actually developed here with the fields and things like that. So what we came back and talked to you about this, and we definitely did with the Planning Commission, and then you may not remember it, but we did talk to you about this because we used some of the the portions of that, or some of the standards that were proposed, as a jumping off base for the activity center changes that we're making down in Johns Pass. Because it was a community process. There was a whole lot of effort went into that. And all of these are supposed to be community planning processes. You don't want to ignore all of that. And there's definitely parts of it that were very important. Some of it you won't see in detail in the activity center itself, but with an activity center being a land use designation, we'll be coming back with a detailed special area plan on how things get developed within that as a zoning item that will follow. We're going to be working on that shortly with you. And so we were using kind of the ideas from that master plan, as they called it, to show what kind of standards you could have to kind of celebrate and also support and protect the kind of small town and village atmosphere that you have down in Johns Pass. We've all been talking about these very same issues and coming back to you with additional detail along the corridor along Gulf Boulevard as well. We're going to have to do that in a second step, but that's the plan that is being discussed and was on here. It's important to note that it's different than the land use and what they called the master plan that we all adopted in '87, thereabouts, and its updates. This is more of an overlay type plan that talks about the design on the property, setbacks, relationship of the building to the street. A lot of things you hear me talking about that we use in planning even outside of this plan. This is, using a lot of those principles of urban design and trying to recapture the relationship between the people in the street, and you don't want everything to be designed around just the cars. we lost all of our downtowns and all of our village settings and all of our pedestrian activity and the comfort between the building and the people when we turned everything into highways and parking lots. That's really the point behind this master plan and the people that designed it for you. There is a lot of really good information in it, but definitely if you were going to use it now, it would need to be updated. Even at that time, it made a lot of huge assumptions about the design you would want downtown here, and also it involved a very creative but very expensive prospect for Pelican Lane of flipping the street and the residential lots, which would give you more of a coffee pot bayou approach down there in the water, which would be really nice, but you'd also have to make a commitment to funding that sort of activity. So there's a lot of implications in here. Now, this group is still working. The principals, Mr. Dewani is not working on projects anymore, but I know that his wife is still involved with the firm and a lot of the people that they trained. There are also other groups that have done this kind of thing. And one of the problems with this group is it's hard to find these things actually implemented because they're very expensive and they require a whole lot of tweaking afterwards. But there are some other groups that do a lot of this kind of thing, and I have seen their plans implemented for infill development and changing kind of the approaches and getting the streets more comfortable. So there are other groups out there that do that kind of design as well. That, you know, I don't know what it costs to go forward with this. We have been trying to use the portions of it we think will be applicable to the city now. And I think that Commissioner Kerr just wanted to bring the whole thing up again as an approach to having, if I understand correctly, is having a kind of a agreed upon approach to design, not just the land use, but what do we want the place to look like? How do you want it to function in the future?
Exactly. I mean, thank you, Director Portal. I think I brought this up at the BOC meeting to put it on the agenda because one of the critiques is what is the plan? You know, property owners, developers, you know, the PD is the way to go now, but if it's acceptable to the board, that's fine, but it doesn't really go to the character of what the town wants it to be. Are we proactive by having a plan? I mean, if you look at John's Pass Village, just the section on that, it's a bit different. You're talking about building this parking garage and putting an overpass. Is that something to consider? According to the plan, that's totally not what the residents wanted at the time the plan was put together. There's other uses. Well, I wouldn't say uses. I'd have to read it again. It's been a while, but that's basically what I have been carrying around. I don't know that the board or has seen it, reviewed it. I know that the planning commission is well-versed in it, or the planning department, I'm sorry. And they may use some of that when they're speaking with developers about different properties. But it's 20 years old. It was never ratified, never accepted. We don't know why. I don't know if there were certain pushbacks on certain areas, or it was just never formally, I have no idea why, but I think it's a great idea to have a plan and be proactive and maybe go to the developers and have their input and try to create the town that, you know, everyone can agree on. There's so much contention on building.
Well, as I understand, you're actually looking at the master plan on a lot of what you're doing on the Johns Pass Village and on the corridor.
We are. I will tell you that the principles that are included in this are not about use, but about design on the lots and the relationship and size between the street and the pedestrian, things like that. It's trying to create an atmosphere and recoup sidewalks as a space that are not so hostile, things like that, and make it more interesting and also economically more viable by making sure you mix things up and you don't get big blocks of buildings and things like that. There's a lot of these design standards that have been in play in planning. We recognized that there were problems with design in the late 70s, and by the mid 80s, everybody was talking about this and using these principles. So a lot of the times you hear me talking about things like the width of the sidewalks, the relationship of the building, the setbacks and things that I didn't get from here specifically, but are working urban planning principles, design principles that we've now come to understand work better and provide a more economically stable community, a more viable and comfortable place to live. So it's about the character of it. Now this community, it's interesting that you went through this process so many years ago, because some communities at that point were designing, adopting design standards. We've always had them for historic districts, but they were putting them in place for other districts and other areas within the city to try to make sure we didn't, make any more of the mistakes that were made basically during the 60s. And so it's interesting that you put that much effort and time into it. I'm not sure exactly what happened when it got to the point of adopting it. It seemed to just, everybody was excited and then it didn't happen. It would have required translating this into ordinance, and that would have required somebody other than this group doing that, because they are designed, this is an architecture and engineering consortium. They're not planners, they aren't attorneys, so they don't know how to turn this into ordinance, and that would have been the next step you'd have gone to. Also, you'd have needed a very careful planning review, because I've worked with this group and with these plans before, and as I say, sometimes they have things in them that aren't achievable in the local setting, because they're big on pictures and design, and the principles they know work in some places don't actually apply in others because of the width of your road or your access points and things like that. So when I've worked with this before, we had the same group do something in Gainesville. When they turned in the plan, we had to go create a commission, local designers and commissioners and such, to go through it bit by bit and correct it and put things in it that were in keeping with the actual design of the community. It had things in it that were colonial in nature, for instance, or it called for 2 sides of parking and two-way traffic on a roadway that was only 14 feet wide. So you have to go back through and make sure that the planning principles apply, that the engineering is appropriate, and that it's something you can achieve before you adopt it into ordinance. That would have been your next step.
The parking garage was brought up, but in 2002, there was not the demand for a parking garage. As everyone knows that's been here for a while.
There were also buildings on that site at the time still.
Yeah,
Yeah,
actually, when I moved here, there was a restaurant there.
Yeah, there were and all through John's Pass, different building configurations they were looking at the time. Things have changed dramatically.
Yes,
And we
they
have to
have.
work with what you have now and fit that into your expectations.
Yeah. So,
Okay, a couple questions. For John's Pass, we've all gotten emails and said that fewer and fewer people are owning more and more of the village. How do we, is that something we should be concerned about? Or that has to be included in the plan?
Okay, that's tricky. You don't want to tell people they aren't allowed to own land. We've got some constitutional issues at play there. We don't want to regulate in a way that prevents people from owning land. I think we also trample on some potential constitutional problems with that, but I leave that to the attorneys. We don't usually regulate in that way. But what we do, and what you will see in the plans we're bringing to you, is we regulate design. For instance, you can own a whole block and you can build on a whole block, but you're going to have to build it in a way that looks like individual buildings of only so wide. You need some architectural articulation, because if you build if you take the Village Boulevard, for instance, and it's all gone, and somebody wants to put in one big monolithic hotel or any other use, one big building, uninterrupted, without the adequate windows and doors and entries and visibility from the street, it will not survive, and you will definitely lose the business type and the tourist draw that you have now. So making sure that you maintain the village style, no matter who owns the property, is what the design standards do. That's the special area plan that we'll be bringing back to you, overlaying the activity center. We have some of that in the activity center as a base, but that's the kind of protection you do. We don't tell people who can own, who can't own, but we do come back, especially in a very sensitive area like this, and say, but this is what you can build here. This is how it needs to interact with the people, and this is what's necessary to keep the economy going.
What we also need to keep in mind in not just there, all over, but particularly in Johns Pass Village, is that those business owners, and they may be running their business, not necessarily landowners, but they're our constituents too.
Yes.
And we are also serving them as well as the rest of the people in Madeira Beach. And we want them to be successful, because as those businesses are successful, Madeira Beach is successful. So you need to keep that in mind when you're talking about like the ISR,
Yes.
whatnot. You need to be able to keep these places to where they can be built back, and these small business owners can come back to a place of business, because if we overregulate down there, then all you can do is do away with businesses to make green space, and that's what's going to happen.
In some of those, it's kind of it's a finesse thing. That's why when we came back to you and we were talking about reducing ISR and allowing people to do their drainage underneath instead of have the big drainage areas, basins, or having big green areas. If you own a huge piece of property and you've got all these lots consolidated, you can afford to put in a drainage ditch or a big pond. You can afford to set off a whole bunch of ISR all in one space. But if you own an individual lot down there and you want to be able to finance new development, you're going to have to do something creative and you get as much of the use out of the space as you can. You don't have any other place to put the drainage or consolidate it. So when we've been coming back asking for amendments that reduce setbacks and reduce ISR but allow for other methods of drainage and other ways of keeping the space open, what we're trying to do is actually protect the small lot development style that you have down there. You can always do it with more money in a big lot, but you know, we got a lot of individual buildings down there and people are not going to be able to rebuild. You know, some of them are in not so great shape, but if you wanted to rebuild and you want to use your lot, you've got to have the flexibility of how you design it and how you can get the most use out of that piece of property.
You know, and it's something to keep in mind, and I'm throwing this out at you, Linda, but we've got a lot of right-of-way down there.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have no problem with them using some of that for their ISR if they're coming back and paving it and they have the understructure done to where we can legitimately do that.
That's a common thing that's done in downtown areas where you have consolidated drainage or consolidated open space, and people sometimes, for instance, will pay into a stormwater fund that funds the collective drainage instead of funding it on their own property, to give them more flexibility and to allow you to put your buildings closer together so that people can move down the street and have an interesting thing to look at the whole time. If you start making big breaks or big walls, you lose them. You know, it's not pedestrian friendly. It's not fun anymore. So yeah, ways that you can consolidate and use property publicly is something that is often done in this kind of district It's like an economic district of its own.
Yeah, and that's where we can get the property owners when they rebuild to maybe do some landscaping for the city and do
Sure.
do that with the pavers and whatnot to where it's not necessarily on their property, it's on that right of way farther out towards the street and make, more user-friendly area and more attractive area for people to walk around in.
Well, from the policy standpoint, what we're doing this time is, instead of having the design first and then having to fit the policy around it, we're trying to come back to you right now with activity center, things in the ordinance, the policy that opens up your ability to regulate and yet at the same time consolidate those kind of activities. And Jenny and I both have that as our background, the policy end of creating these districts and making them more flexible. The urban design and the drawings and things like that, there's a lot of software out there that will provide a lot of that sort of thing too. That just gives you an idea of what to do. It doesn't necessarily build it for you. You don't have to define architectural style in this district because you don't have any history of a specific style. But the proportions and the use of the property, the relationship of one property to another, the relationship of the property to the people on the sidewalk, those are the important things that are going to make this a long-lived and successful economic district.
Well, maybe that's what we need to kind of steer towards is using the right-of-way for a lot of that ISR space and have, whether it's developers or people that have individual buildings, go out to that space and do it in those areas.
We can definitely do that by policy and set the stage for that, and then we need real studies of engineers and design to show how that could be used, something that we could do in the next level.
How would you suggest we move forward, Linda? I know that, you're familiar with the Duane plan, the master plan. Jenny may be, but let's say you decided you didn't want to be here anymore and someone else came in that was new. I don't know. I'm just thinking that I think the feel, and let's just use Johns Pass Village as the area, the activity center now, but the same thing could be talked about on the entire citywide for different areas. How do we put that structure into on paper?
That's what we're trying to do now. We're starting with the policy level in the activity center, and then we have to do a land use change along Gulf Boulevard that has a similar impact in terms of opening up how the properties are used policy-wise, and then come back with special area plans over top of those to show how you actually build it on the property. Not to be overly constrictive in any way, but actually to give you space and to show what proportion will work. So that's actually what we're doing, and we will be using a lot of the same standards that show up in here and doing plans. We also want to come back and do your whole land development code over that has more of this approach where you have grids that show how things can be done and pictures for examples. It's a lot easier for people to use than reading the mass of code and its confusion that we have right now. So the idea would be to amend everything and get it onto paper, and adopt it.
Right, I look at it as the vision going forward, and how do we keep that vision alive, I guess.
Right, we're working on it. We have a lot going on. It happens to be the time when we have the comp plan coming up, and so as I said earlier when we were talking about budget, we have a little more, I put more space in the consulting in case we need to get people coming in to do the design and the drawings and things like that as we get closer to the special area plans. But the idea is for us to come back and gradually change everything to get you to a point where you have a set of standards you understand, is consistent with what you think the community should look like and how it should function, and that's usable. It's a lot, your codes are old. Some of them were adopted after the city was already built and they never did apply. That's been a problem that that's kind of weighing us down, and we keep trying to fix things a little bit at a time, but obviously everything needs to be fixed and consolidated. We're also very conscious of how much time this takes, and small governments and, personnel changes and things like that, but, and we have you have a lot of development going on here. It's just constant, it never stops for permitting, so what we're trying to do is get a staff big enough together to do the base work and get the policy in place so that if we need to bring in more detailed people to draw things up, we can do that on a consulting basis. Right now, honestly, we're just having trouble even getting applications in for jobs because stuff we talked about before. It's a really hard market.
So
But
there's nothing as a board that you would like us to look at or address to help?
we're coming back with the activities center pretty quick. We're going to turn it into the, I know we've talked about it a lot, but we're going to turn it into the county, the Forward Pinellas staff, just to get the staff input on it. And then we'll be bringing it back to you with their comments to create the final document. So we'll be going through step by step how this is constructed and start getting that land use stuff in place. So it's on its way.
Yeah, so these are things we need to keep in mind, though, for those business owners, just like I think you had trouble with FEMA on wanting to do stuff. It was government regulation. And the business owners down there and the property owners,
Oh, yeah, that was mostly the county.
they're, they run into the same thing when we throw these obstacles in front of them.
Sure.
And that's why I mentioned possibly using right-of-way for ISR, and have the businesses or property owners take care of that on the right-of-way for us. And that's another way to get some green space and some drainage and whatnot there without taking up, some of those are very small. They're like townhomes, they're businesses, individual buildings shoved up against one another. So,
Yeah, if it's a good planning process and you have good planners working on it, whatever the policy comes out as needs to support the businesses there and the future growth. So everything we do has to consider not just what does it look like, but can people do business in that setting?
all right.
Now, we both have backgrounds in economic development as well as redevelopment, so we can bring that into play in terms of the policy. And we always talk about that. What do we do to protect the economic viability of the district? And I've told you it's my concern about not having a policy that's consistent with the county on land use, because the one that they adopted has it all looking like a series of McDonald's and gas stations. That's what they planned for down there. And that's a huge problem for us. It's a big mistake that was made at the county and at the local level in not keeping up with that sort of thing. So we need to fix it and make sure that we're protected for the future. We know if there's a disaster, and even if there's not, we keep talking about, well, don't worry about it because in a disaster they could build it back. Well, not entirely. Besides which, we want people to be able to improve, enhance, and protect and maintain their buildings too. We don't want to wait until a disaster comes before somebody can fix or create a new building. If something's, it's old and it needs to be replaced, let them do it. But within the character that's already there.
Yeah, and if we go back to 70%, there are some businesses that simply are not going to have the room to rebuild.
That's entirely true, yes.
And that's the same way up and down Gulf Boulevard, in that they lost 17 feet of their property when they widened Gulf Boulevard. So some of those businesses actually have alleys behind them. So their property isn't as big as my residential lot. Mm-hmm. They're tiny. So, we really need to take a closer look at what we're trying to do here. That's all I've got. Good, okay. Any public comment on this? Next is Big C meetings. Mr. Kerr, did you put that on there?
Yep, I did. I just asked, I'm interested in what the Big C can offer Madeira Beach and what Madeira Beach can promote or push and to look for assistance through the Big C. And I don't know that the board is updated with minutes from the Big C meetings. I know when they're hosted here that we can watch the video, but that's 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5, whatever it becomes times. And I was just, I'd like to have that maybe a few minutes once a month, just kind of get an update of what's going on at the Big C, and maybe if the board has any input on anything that we might ask to take to the Big C.
We can take anything to the Big C. The Big C was actually very helpful to Madeira Beach on getting funding for the dredging of Johns Pass, on getting funding for the groins. They have written letters as a group to representatives, spoken to Representative Cheney, to Senator DeSigley.
Well, exactly. And
Sent things to the, letters to the governor, as we have done on supporting them on their beach nourishment issues. The Big C is probably the best group in the area for helping another barrier island city, and that's what the Big C stands for, is Barrier Island Governmental Council. The minutes, I would say the minutes they're public information. They can be emailed to you every month. If y'all would like a copy of Big C minutes, they can be.
I would. I mean, you just made my point, that all these great things are coming out of the Big C and all this, but we're not aware. I'm not aware. And I just think that it would be you have the residents watching the board meetings, and I think it would be helpful for them as well to see how things are progressing and where things are moving.
The Big C meetings are, at least when they're here at Madeira Beach, I do believe they're live streamed, just like our regular meetings.
Yes, when we have them here.
And probably, I don't know if they're kept on our website.
They're on our YouTube channel.
Okay.
Yep.
And they're open to the public, so you're welcome to come to them anytime. Last Wednesday of every month at 9 a.m.
9 a.m.
Yeah, next Wednesday, the 29th, the meeting is in
No,
I'm
it's
sorry,
going to
no.
be up in Indian.
I'm sorry, Indian Rocks Beach.
Yeah, Indian Rocks.
Again, many residents work, and it would just be a great opportunity to just take a few minutes, maybe once a month, to just kind of do a recap or provide the minutes when we're together. That's all I'm asking.
Okay, I can fill you all in on that after the meetings.
Yes, I think at the last meeting, there was somebody talking about climate change and sea level rise and things. Was there anything that you guys then talked about and said that we should be considering or doing?
Not really. It was normally it is a presentation by one group or another. We've had them there for climate change, and, we've had Duke Energy there. It varies from month to month. That's set up by the president of the Big C, who is Mayor Al Johnson of St. Pete Beach. Sometimes they struggle to get someone to give us a presentation, and we just have breakfast.
I mean, I was able to come to a meeting, I'll say a year ago. I think the Treasure Island, maybe the Director of Public Works did a presentation on sea level rise and what changes they're making with their seawall regulations as far as heights and construction, and what they're looking at comparing regular, from rainfall, moving that water and channeling it to the bay versus the sunny day flooding and how the two are different and design standards may be required in the future road improvements. And I thought it was a great presentation. I mean, if, you know, I don't know that the Big C can get videos of the meetings online when they're not here, but,
It's up to the individual city.
yeah.
So we happen to be the high-tech guy along the beaches. That's why we have so many of them here. They like coming here. But, you know, we also talk about ordinances, and that's why you will see no electric micro-mobility devices along the beach, because we will have an ordinance in front of us, but also the other cities will. We try to have consistency up and down the beach so that you're not riding your electric bike on the beach in one city, you know, and like you go north up through Reddington, it's kind of hard to have it legal in Madeira, and then it's illegal when you go to Reddington. So we try to have that consistent thing up and down the beaches. We talk a lot about that. You know, smoking on the beach, I'm sure, will be a hot button item coming up, since I think that's going into effect the first of the month.
Cities.
As far as the state goes, we have the ability
Right, we have
to
the
do
ability starting July 1 to adopt an ordinance to prohibit smoking on the sand and in public parks, I think, right, Tom?
except for cigars and unfiltered cigarettes.
Correct.
Anything with a filter.
I put up on the screen the schedule of the next Big C meetings: June in Indian Rocks Beach, July in Bel Air Beach, August in Clearwater, and back down here in Treasure Island, September.
Yeah, Clara, can you just share the schedule with the other commissioners, and
Yeah, we'll send it.
you can share the agenda via email, and then if they want to go, they can go to the meetings and sit in on them.
Yes, sir, I'll ask them for all that and have them send that to me.
It's all on their website, so all the meeting minutes are on there as well. Actually, all the way back to 2003. So
Wow.
for all the Big C meetings.
Wow.
It's good to know. Didn't know that the meetings or the minutes were available online.
Is this a group that it would be worth discussing about a special district or something for the cities on the beach, for like water flow, for dredging, for beach nourishment, or the different things that we run into that other cities don't?
Well, and that's brought up, and they would love to have our sand. The problem is that FDEP, the Corps of Engineers, will not dredge that close to the shoreline. They feel like they can't get their equipment in there. They will only dredge the pass itself, the channel. I feel like there is a Johns Pass borrow pit, which is where they get sand from to do beach nourishment. In my opinion, that borrow pit is too far out. I think they need to take sand off that northern shoal, and that's going to prevent a lot of that sand from coming in. But all this stuff is, you get involved in that governmental quagmire to where you're dealing with FDEP, the Corps of Engineers, the county. There are so many different groups involved that you've got to get on board to get any of that done, that it's I know Megan's back there shaking her head, yes, it's a difficult thing, and literally to get funding for the dredging of Johns Pass. It's something I've been working on for 2 years. And almost every Big C meeting that we have, I bring it up. It doesn't matter who they have coming in, if they are in any way related to, I even had a discussion with the director of FDEP. I've got his cell phone. He wouldn't answer when I called. So the Big C does a lot on helping out on that. And to your point, they have helped us out. They would like to have that sand, but they can't get things, thus far, they can't get things put on. And I'm going to continue kind of carrying the flag on now that we've got funding to do the dredging, and that will come up on item I. But we've got to figure out a number of things now, and that is, where do we put the sand? How far out do we go? How deep do we dredge? A lot of this is in that study that we had done. But this dredge is, 7 to 10 years from now. This isn't a fix. This study was supposed to be a fix. It's a temporary fix, but it's not a permanent solution by any means. So what I want to continue working on is to get Johns Pass used as a borrow area, to take that sand every 7 to 10 years or however often they renourish the beaches north of us, and use that sand and pump it up there or pump it to Treasure Island, so that we don't get any dollars for beach nourishment because our forefathers had sense enough to put groins in. But in my way of thinking, in a way, we're kind of penalized because we've got groins. Financially, we don't get any funding to help repair the groins or replace the groins or dredge Johns Pass. Instead, they pump more sand north of us, and it continues to migrate south. So that's why I want to continue working on this, to try to have something continuous going on, just like beach nourishment continually goes on, on a scheduled basis, 7 to 10 years. Let's also do that with a dredge on the pass, to where we keep it navigable and keep Johns Pass Village viable, and keep those currents down to where we don't have another loss of life down there. So, and these are all things that the other mayors help with. It's really a great group. I get more out of the Big C than I do Pinellas Council of Mayors or League of Mayors, Florida League of Mayors. It's a great group because we all have something in common.
Has there ever been any discussion on dredging or ways of collecting sand on the intercoastal? The drain we have over here is about 80% blocked, and we have probably 4 feet of sand there that didn't used to be there.
I would be willing to bet heavily on the fact that they're going to tell us we're on our own on that. That's something the city would have to do as far as any dredging goes.
Is dredging the right way, or is there some way to catch the sand before it deposited from the streets?
Yes.
But that's also cost.
Which outfall are you referring to?
The one between Harbor and Second Street?
So there are, baffle boxes, CDS units that would make the sediment separate before it enters out into. But a lot of it, when you see something that's blocked that much, that does not come from the drainage, that comes from the movement of the water. Yes, there is a small amount of sediment, probably within a 20-year span, that may build up to about a foot, but in an area over there, I would find that highly unlikely.
Okay.
Anything else? Any public comment on this? Okay, next is the beach groins. You want to fill us in on, that's starting next month, right?
Well, it's in the process. As we talked about earlier, we've completed the surveying of the beach groins. We are in design and permitting phase. Our plan is to hopefully start that project after nesting season and complete it before next year's nesting season. But I can get more up-to-date information.
Okay, and to me, the big thing is if we don't have, hopefully, I don't see why we would have to go all the way back, but
That's all part of that 100-year storm plan that they have to do the models, and unfortunately with what we found from Army Corps is they don't have the exact locations or the depths of most of these groins because I don't know if they've lost it over time, but that's the reason why we had to find the ends of the groins to send to Army Corps in order for them to either issue a permit or give us an exemption.
yeah, because I mean, when there's already beach there and they've been covered for years and years, I don't see any sense in replacing them way up there.
I would agree with you.
You know, maybe if we could go out a little farther, that'd be great, but I won't tell.
We'll see what we can do.
And I would say start on the south end and move north because that's going to help with the sand issue going into the pass.
Well, what our plan is going to be, because we're going to be in a very small window, especially it's going to be tide dependent, is our hope is to get a contractor that has multiple crews and work on multiple groins at a time. That way we can finish it within that 5-month period.
Okay, makes sense, good. Do we get to pick out the color of the, never mind. Anyone else got anything? Any public comment on this? Just, Megan, if you will, just keep us updated.
Yeah. I was just going to say, Mayor, we'll provide you an update pretty much weekly going
Okay.
on from now on.
Good. Next is installing no swimming buoys by the jetties and strong current. That's,
We had, I think Chief Belk had received information from the county chief regarding adding similar signage, but I think to avoid our looking for rip currents as well. There are already some out there, but I think, Chief, if you can.
Yeah, so the county reached out to me after the incident a few weeks ago, stating they had some extra funding in their water rescue budget and asked if there was anything they could do. And they suggested to put some more signs down there. There's 18 signs down there now that say no trespassing private property, no swimming, or a swimmer with a circle and a line through it. But they suggested maybe doing some that have the verbiage of dangerous rip current and what to do to get out of it. Of course, I spoke to Robin and we were like, sure, we'll do 4 of those. And then I had a meeting with them again and they asked what else we could do. And we're looking at, what are they called? The throwables from the pier where the fishermen are. Yeah. I've spoken to probably 3 different fishermen they're almost in tears because there's nothing they can do. And I explained to them that it's a good idea in theory, but with all the issues going on down there, those throwables will be in the back of somebody's truck or they'll be riding on the back, pulling each other around the parking lot or who knows.
yeah, you'll be replacing them daily.
Yeah, and then they suggested maybe doing flags like green, yellow, red for currents or what have you. Just ideas that they were
Yeah,
kinda
those,
going
I
back.
think the flags are going to disappear as quickly as the
Yeah.
throw
Yeah,
rings.
unless you had somebody out there kind of watching or observing, I mean, so Sandkey Park, Fort DeSoto, and Clearwater Beach, the lifeguards put the flags out depending on, I think, the level of, what they're observing. So, but then they remove them. Well, they're secured on the lifeguard towers, so there's a whole different process and different level of resources.
Something else we kind of talked about too is working collaboratively with the county, because all the lifeguards are county. I said that maybe there's a way that we can, I don't know, split the cost of having lifeguards back on the beach. I guess we had them many, many years ago, and they've kind of gone away. But, I've been trying to get hold of the water rescue director for the county and just sit down and see what we can come up with, if that's even an option.
Also on the signage, and I've mentioned this before, our signs down there they're at the crossovers. We need to get some signage. I mean, you can go down there and go to the beach and not see a sign from that parking lot if you're not paying attention. And I still think we need to get signs by the pay stations, because everybody's paying to park.
Yeah, again, if instead of kind of splitting up the funds for flags and throwables and whatnot, we can ask the county for 8 signs. They've already committed to 4.
Well, we've got signs that are down there, but like the one that's closest to the jetties, it's midway between the jetties and the crossover.
No.
Has,
And they said too, it's up to us. What do we want on the sign? So they're willing to pay for them if we just tell them what we want on them. If any ideas, please feel free.
I think I got a picture on my phone, Megan. You got one there? Okay.
So, obviously, I'm the sign person. I'm not kidding, probably every bit of at least 12 signs directly in that area. I went out, I rechecked them, that are either dangerous currents, no swimming, rip currents, no swimming. They're everywhere down there. Especially underneath the bridge, there is 12
I know,
signs.
I'm at
But
John's
we
Pass
need enforcement.
weekly.
Right. And I just reinstalled in better locations, more signs. I have put on the end of the jetty for the last year. I've had signs that say no swimming, dangerous current. They steal them. So, at least 6 have gone missing.
I don't
No matter
doubt it.
what kind of bolts you put in there, they'll figure it out.
Well,
Take them.
Ray's stop sign at the corner of 140th and South Bay Shore, it disappeared too.
They're hot
They got-
commodities.
yeah.
People like signs.
Yep. Okay,
But we will look to complete this within the next few weeks.
Okey
So
doke.
to get them out there.
next is there any public comment on this? Nope. Next is item I, fast tracking of John's Pass dredging and getting out an RFP. Needless to say, this is important as heck, and we got to decide what we're going to do with the sand and all that stuff. Megan? Okay, well, so what's your answer?
So,
No. Yeah.
yeah, Mayor and Commission will, meeting Friday with a representative from the county to kind of determine the collaborative, what type of collaboration we will have going from there, because the county, I think, has a lot more information than we do, and certainly the expertise on and the context to get this moving as quickly as possible. I think we do have to wait for turtle nesting to be completed, but
Yeah.
I mean, so similar to the beach groins type process, even though it'll be, out obviously in the channel.
Yeah, it's, probably it's going to take that long to get permits and all that kind of stuff anyhow and get it out to bid and all, so.
And so we'll have more, that'll be also to provide you an update every week as to the status and where we are. But yes, to issue RFP and really get the specifics and, again, the most important thing, the permitting as quickly as we can. Get
Okay.
it moving, and then we have to identify from the state, obviously, since it's a direct appropriation, the details regarding that for the financial, to again, pay for the expenses.
Yeah.
Do we have a choice on where the sand goes? Is that our-
Probably
Little
not.
bit.
That's to be determined.
Right. Yeah, a lot of it is still kind of to be determined, and the permit will identify where is the optimal sand placement.
But it makes no sense to pump it offshore.
Correct.
Pump it right next to those new beach groins.
Yeah.
Normally, it's,
Well, if it's,
Digging.
23,000 cubic yards roughly that we're talking about moving?
That's the estimate.
Roughly, yeah.
So it can go on our beaches, really.
But we
and
don't
it
want
will-
to pump it onto the groins when we're gonna have to
No,
expose the
no,
groins.
right,
no.
And plus, the groins are on the north side of town. All
Well,
the
yeah.
south side is covered.
I'm talking about farther up where they're covered, though. We had a dune there that we lost during ETA, actually, right there at the jetties. So, but up towards the dune and going north.
That dune is back in full force.
Yeah, I
Mother
think it-
Nature brought her back.
I think, yeah, I was just gonna say that I think something did.
We
Some-
had,
some
we
of
had,
it's there,
we
but
had
it
an
shot-
erosion, but
Yeah.
it's completely back. We're just missing the COs.
But you could, some of the storms, and at least in the 6 months I've been here, have eroded different areas, obviously, in that area, but along the jetty, where you see the holes building sort of underneath the sidewalk and where the larger rocks are. But that's probably, to fill all of that, probably wouldn't even be, but 500 cubic, maybe even not
No,
quite
but
that many.
I'm just talking, continually up the
Correct.
beach, higher than where the groins are exposed. There's some condos along there that have actually removed sand dunes. So I don't know how they did that, but they did.
Oh, recently we had, I think it was, I don't remember exactly where, but one of our deputies did call and say, hey, we stopped a person who was out there with a shovel excavating one of the dunes, and obviously made them stop and
Yeah.
told them, please never do that again.
Well, they were doing it on a Sunday. Had a crew there with a Bobcat. And apparently they had, not on a Sunday, but apparently they had permission to do it. So, okay.
and normally they want you to put it down drift, so it would be in Treasure Island or someplace like that.
These were leveled out. It's actually the condo building just south of Caddy's. They have,
Were you mentioning, Commissioner Hudson, about where to put the sand
that-
that's
that they're gonna-
dredged?
They're gonna tell you where you can put it, as opposed to,
Right, that's,
but,
as opposed to us choosing, but I'm sure we'll be able to provide some input.
Yeah.
I would, but again, a little bit of even the USF report and other reports, the science isn't, 100% there as to where to put it and, the impact that may have, but clearly it will need to be placed somewhere.
yeah.
well, the renourishments from up north is what caused a lot of this to happen so
what-
quickly. So, do we know 23,000 cubic,
That's what was in the study.
is that, do we have enough money to do that? Do we need to,
I would hope so.
That's where the estimate from the state came. But we won't know until we issue an RFP.
so does that go far enough out that we can move like all of the green buoys back north a little bit instead of going out of the pass and having to do
We will not be doing that out there. We will be doing inside the,
all inside
Yeah.
the pass? Okay.
but that, where you're talking about is where I'm talking about, that it's shoaled up, where I would like to see them using it as a borrow pit, because I know when I moved here, that pass, you went straight out of
Right.
it. You didn't have to go south. So, anyone else got anything else? Is there any public comment on this? Okay, next is discussion of installing some boat slips down here along ROC Park. And that's something that's been talked about for years and years. Do you know how many years, Megan? Never mind.
At least 7.
Okay. And so, and they were talking about doing, I think, all up and down there, but my suggestion is just try half a dozen and see how it goes. And then if there's a demand and we're making some parking revenue on it, then expand it years on, every couple of years, do half a dozen of them or something like that, and gradually build it up. Because gradually, Madeira Way hopefully will be a little downtown area with some nice restaurants that people can come by boat and dock up and be able to walk over there and have dinner and have some nightlife and all that stuff. So,
If you're going to put some in, can we put them as far that direction as possible?
well, I was thinking about right
Right.
here across from that sailboat.
One of the things that
Yeah,
I'm worried about is with the docks that we have, people do use it once in a while. There's a guy in a catamaran that comes down from the north and docks there most days. But they're also using the dock for, I assume it's somebody renting those electric surfboards that rise up out of the water. And I believe he's giving lessons, and so he's kind of using that as a business.
yeah, that's a
And
no-no.
we're also going to have, I think, what's the right word? The people that take people out fishing,
Charter boat
charters,
captains.
are going to be using those as to pick up people. And so that's something, whether or not, that we're going to have to worry about
Well,
this whole thing.
that's, code enforcement, really. I mean, they try to do it at the marina, and we've had to stop them over there. And we'll, if we see that going on here, we'll stop them here.
Okay, because they use McDonald's a lot, and I would
I
think
know
that
they do.
this would be they would definitely do this because they have parking there.
Robin, on the weekends, he just walks around. We'll get him a ticket book.
I think Tom,
Yeah, Mayor, I just wanted to mention one thing. Before we get too far down the path relative to the boats, I want to make sure that we've gone through and we've looked at all of the deeds that are associated with this section of the city's owned property to make sure that if we have in fact gotten a grant for the purchase of the property from, for example, Florida Communities Trust, that there isn't some reverter language in it or there isn't some prohibition language in it that would prohibit that kind of activity. Sometimes when these Florida Community Trust properties or grants for monies that were used from Florida Communities Trust to purchase property, they want to make sure that it's used for certain purposes and not necessarily a commercial purpose. And so I just want to make sure that, and I had mentioned that to Robin before the meeting, that before we get too far down that path, we really need to do that research, look at those deeds to make sure that we don't do anything or start something that we can't complete.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
We'll make sure that'll be part of our research. And we received, I don't think I provided them to you, but they've been since, well, several years ago, just some very preliminary site plans showing different variations of docks back here. So I'll forward that to the commission just as a informational only. However, yeah, what Mr. Trask said, we'll definitely research and make sure that
Yeah,
it's
and
permissible.
Mr. Trask, we already have some docks down there, couple.
Yeah, I understand. We have the dock down there that we use for the purposes of the jet skis or the fireboat or whatever it is, but that is not a commercial purpose. That's a purpose for the fire department. And so
So you're saying that if we charged for a boat slip down there,
I just wanted
would that be the
That's the-
issue probably?
yeah, that's the issue problem that
Okay.
I'm concerned about. I just want to make sure that, I mean, if you were to put the docks there and you allow people to use them free of charge, then we wouldn't be looking at that issue. But if you're going to charge them, I want to just make sure that before we go down that path, there is no prohibition from us doing that.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, they're-
I'd like to see them put in, I'd like to see a half a dozen put in anyhow, just for residents to be able to use to come down here by boat.
Yeah, there's two currently out there other than the
Yeah.
fire department, one that are free and first come,
Right.
first use.
And then, then they got a place to come by boat for either for an event or, at ROC Park or to go down to the downtown area.
Has anyone done any kind of return, crunched any numbers to see if it would be more of an expense or if it would actually create a revenue stream?
Well,
Or
That's what he's talking about, though.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't, at this point, none that I found. I have a feeling, I mean, you're likely to recover a small percentage of the cost. And that depends on the number that are placed out there, but even if you charge $5 or $10, we charge $10 to launch at the marina. So if we were to charge, say, $10 to tie up, I mean, these are going to be probably hundreds of thousands, whether we would recover that. It'd likely be probably 20 years down, but we can certainly
Well, yeah,
research that.
it's probably more of a service to the residents than it is a money-making.
yeah, my feeling is it would be a service to the residents that live in the Reddingtons or service to Treasure Island residents, not necessarily the Madeira Beach residents because it's so close to where we live.
Yeah, but I'm out on the boat all the time. I'm by here all the time in the boat. And a lot of Madeira Beach residents are by here all the time.
That would be my concern.
I mean,
Is it worth putting up a couple of docks now for Madeira Beach residents only and see how much it gets used before we start spending money? A lot of money on meters and things like that?
well, I don't know if the meters, if we could put meters, I don't know if it would be worth it to buy a pay station to put there.
No, likely not. It would just be, yeah, I mean, kind of based on
Yeah.
utilizing an app on your phone to pay,
Yeah.
but we can look at all the options. But that's likely the least expensive.
Okay, so y'all think we ought to try 5 or 6 of them?
One or two?
I'd like to look at some numbers.
Right, well, we will bring back to you, I mean, obviously what the estimated costs will be, et cetera.
Yeah, I'd like to
And
have, I'd like
designs
to
and
have that,
locations.
yeah,
Yeah,
that discussion.
yep.
And whether or not, a lot of that is going to depend on whether it's a permanent dock or a floating dock. Because a floating dock's probably going to be a lot more than, and they don't have to be something fancy, just a catwalk, basically. Any public comment on this? Next is park maintenance for fiscal year 2023.
As we had discussed at the budget workshop, I mean, we've added 340,000, it might be 360,000 in next year's budget for the maintenance that's been brought up multiple times, so in aggregate, it's probably over 400,000, or close to 500,000 when we look at adding, even when you include just the mowing and weeding of, for example, just out here, because I think this contract is $45,000 for next year. So we're looking at approaching 500,000 for the maintenance that will be completed.
Well, and probably if we get caught up, it may drop back from that the following
Yes,
year.
correct.
Because first is to get it back in shape from years of neglect, really. We all good on that? Any public comment on that? Okay. We have 30 minutes till game time. With that, this meeting is adjourned at 7:31 PM.